What's up, guys? Welcome to Poor Man Mods. In the last video of this 1UZ swap series, I showed you how to convert from a W55 to a W58 transmission for the IS300 1UZ, and I also showed you how to adapt the 1UZ to a W series transmission. And where we left off, the engine was on the ground. In this video, I'm going to show you installing the engine and getting it to where I think we're going to be ready to start this thing up. I made a list here of things it needs to fire and of things it needs to drive. And in this video, we're going to tackle all the things that we need to get this engine to fire. A lot of it's wiring. There's a little bit of manipulation of some things, different throttle cable, bunch of very important things to make sure this engine will run in this car. And yeah, it's a lot of information based. It's not going to be that entertaining. It's going to be a lot of information based. This video is definitely for the person who wants to 1UZ swap their IS300. A lot of information in this video, a lot of wiring. I'll try to do it the best way that I can, but I know wiring can be difficult and hard to follow. So with that being said, let's get into getting this 1UZ in the IS300 and seeing what all it needs to make it work. All right, we got the engine and transmission in. I ran into some issues here, but let me explain. This mount does not want to use all 4 bolts on the W58. As you can see, there's not a bolt here or here, so we're just rocking 2 bolts. And yeah, I'm just gonna send it. I could not figure out a way to add more hardware there, so we just have 2 bolts securing it. It's hard to see, but there are 2 in the front, and we got it to bolt up. It wasn't happy. We did have to tweak the bushing a little bit to get this bracket on, but it's in, and I'm hoping we have clearance for the shifter up there. Now we're going to fill it with 2.5 quarts of Redline MT90, and we're going to do this the easy way through the shifter hole. Alright, so I got the punch list started. Let's start chipping away at this thing and see if we can get it to fire, hopefully in this video, if not maybe the next. Let's get to it. Okay, we have a slight clearance problem after installing the transmission and engine. I guess with the adapter kit and the bell housing, it's a little shorter. That's why I had to move that mount on the bottom of the transmission back 1 bolt hole. But now, as you can see, the shifter hole is a little too far forward. It's not enough room to get our cube shifter on there, so we're going to do a cut here, see if we can fold it down and make some clearance. I'm going to try to do this cut with a Sawzall to avoid sparks. Hopefully it works out. Okay, my Sawzall cut that like butter, and that is why I put tape over it so no metal shavings got down in there. Now we'll see if we can hammer that down and get us clearance. I think we are in business. Ah, yes. Great success. It fits. Alright, let's add some oil to this thing. We're going to use the Freddy 3D printed ISF oil funnel because this thing is basically a mini F. Freddy also makes this in non-F funnels. I'll have a link for this down below. This makes oil changes super quick and easy, and you don't have to worry about it falling out. Just makes life that much simpler. Okay, there we go. We have our fuel line hooked up. It's a little close to the header. I think I might put some heat insulation around there just to protect it. And got our brake lines connected too. They're all bled. Pretty much finished down here once I tighten that drive shaft. It's in. Just need to get those bolts in the back tightened to, make me feel a little bit better. And this is interesting. Here we have the speed sensor on the transmission and the reverse light switch. Check this out. It's been repaired or swapped previously. This entire harness has been cut and twisted by a previous owner. So I wonder if a rat chewed through this at some point or if this car has been swapped at some point. Very interesting. But all of these are our connections going to the body harness. And basically what I did, I just took the IS300 harness and just cut out 1 wire at a time of stuff that I knew I didn't need until I ended up with the stuff that I needed. All right, I have been busy trying to track down all the wires that I need, labeling a bunch of stuff. Some I might need, some I might not, but we're just going to tackle one wire at a time here. This may look overwhelming, but it shouldn't be too bad. We're going to do one wire at a time. We're going to start off with the starter to start things off. So basically what I did, I took the IS300 2JZ harness, plugged it into the body connectors here, and I cut out everything I knew I didn't need. So a lot of the emissions, the O2 sensors and whatnot, and I ended up with the wires that I knew I was going to need. Starter, alternator, speed sensor, reverse switch, AC, a few other things. So we're going to start off with the starter. And if you botched your harness or whatnot, here is the connector. I believe it's EA1, and I'm going to try to provide as much documentation as I can for this. A bunch of people posted pinouts and diagrams and stuff. I'll try to link to everything that I can. But this connector here, this black wire with a yellow stripe coming out, this is going to be the wire that sends signal to the solenoid of your starter. This is the only wire you have to mess with for the whole starter circuit. Everything else works. And what I have back here is the connector for the 1UZ that runs to the starter and also the knock sensors. I cut off the leads going to the knock sensors because we're not using them. So all I have to do is strip that back and crimp this wire. Should be pretty simple. I used male and female spades here just in case I want to change the way it's routed and it doesn't fit, because I'm going to try to use the ECU box here, whatever. So whatever, used male and female spades, and that completes the starter circuit. Very easy. We're starting off easy here. Let's move on to the alternator circuit. Get some things out of the way here. This right here is the power wire from the 2JZ. So this just runs up to the fuse box area, and you can put it on the post of the alternator. Now for the plug on the back, the 1UZ and the 2JZ take the same plug. So here's the diagram for the alternator. Right now I have one wire that's connected from the connector to the body harness, and that is this white wire with a blue stripe. And it goes to this pin right here. And that wire, according to this diagram, is the white wire with a blue stripe. L in this diagram means blue. So this wire comes all the way over here to the alternator 7.5 amp fuse. Now we have this wire, the blue wire with a red stripe, and the red wire with a blue stripe not connected to anything. Let's look at the diagram. The red wire with a blue stripe, which is the one in the middle, goes to a connector, which is then fed power by the 10 amp gauge fuse, which is in the kick panel back there. And that gauge fuse is turned on by the ignition switch. So power comes through here, gets fused down through here and into the alternator. So there's two power sources coming in here. And then our final wire, which is our blue wire with a red stripe, goes to the ECU and comes out on this side. And when you look at the documentation, when it comes out of the ECU, it goes to the theft deterrent, so security system. Being that I don't have the ECU, I think we are pretty much eliminating the theft deterrent security in this car. So I'm gonna not wire this wire up or this one. I'll leave this one connected since I have it, but I'm not sure if it's gonna be doing anything. If anyone has any more clarity on what this circuit is for other than security, let me know. But why are there two power sources coming to the alternator? One's a 10 amp, the other's a 7.5 amp. So we're just going to connect the main power here, which is already connected directly to the battery, basically directly to the battery. This wire right here, that's what this is. So we'll plug this plug into the alternator and leave this white wire with a blue stripe connected. And I guess I'll cut these two fairly short, but not too short that I can't repair it in the future. I did not have to adjust the length of the wire. I got it plugged into the back of the alternator there, ran it underneath the alternator, got it coming up here, It's just roughed in for now and running to its connector. Here is the oil level switch and temperature switch. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to get this to work along with some other of these sensors that I'm trying to reuse because I don't have the factory ECU. I'm not gonna give up on this just yet, but I'm gonna plug it into the oil level switch over there and just leave this wire coiled up for now. I'm gonna try to get this to work, but I'm not sure if it's gonna be possible because a lot of this is CAN bus stuff. So I'm just gonna plug it in and maybe try to figure it out later. Here's the harness for the reverse light and the speed sensor. I put some nice new loom on it. We're gonna run this back to the transmission. Everything is already going to the body harness except for these two wires. One wire is for the speed sensor, the other is for the reverse light switch, and they both go to 12 volt power. So we might make a whole bunch of connections up here. We might make a 12 volt junction up here. I'm just gonna leave these two wires disconnected for now, but have it up here, and I'll run these connectors back to the transmission. This power steering cooler has just been in my way, and since the pump is now gonna be over here, I'm gonna remove it. It's in my way of the wiring, and it's been very annoying. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be removing it entirely, or maybe I'll reuse it and figure out how to make it work over there. If I do completely eliminate this one, I'll make sure to put some kind of cooler on my other pump, and it's not on there yet. What a surprise, running into a little bit of an issue here with my wiring. I'm trying to figure out my ABS sensor. Now, I did not modify any of these wires yet. There's 3 red wires here. The 2 on the outside are from my ABS sensor. The one in the middle is from my reverse light switch. According to the diagram though, according to this diagram, all 3 wires from the ABS sensor are supposed to be going to the EA2 connector here, which this is the EA2, and I have it labeled 9, 8, 7, and 6. And you can see on the diagram here, 7, 6, 8 pin for the EA2. So, this is not correct. I guess maybe this is when the previous owner cut and spliced that harness. So this wire in the middle is for the reverse lights, but it's the red wire with a blue stripe. And on the diagram here, red wire, blue stripe, that is supposed to go to the 10 amp gauge fuse. So it's supposed to be getting power. And that's EA2 7. EA2, pin 7 on mine, 9, 8, 7. There's no power coming out of there. My key is turned on. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna cut this wire. This is for the reverse light switch. This needs to go to power, along with the red wire with a blue stripe from the speed sensor. That needs to go to 12 volt power, along with that wire here from the reverse light switch. Then, this wire from the reverse light switch is basically the ground. Okay, so this is not totally necessary, but what I did here, I took a pre-made connector and I wired it to a switch 12 volt source in this connector, EA1, and then I found 2 more wires that are switch 12 volt that went to this connector here, E3, and I just made 2 switched 12 volt leads here. One of them I'll connect to my reverse light and speed sensor, and I might use one of the other leads for my ECU wiring, but I knew I was going to need a couple switched ignition sources here, so that's why I utilized this. I thought it would make it a little bit simpler. So I think what I'll do next is take one of these and connect it to my speed sensor and reverse lights. Simple enough. Connected those 2 wires from the speed sensor and reverse lights, and now they are getting power. Now I want to connect the reverse light to actually make it work. So this wire here is coming from the switch and goes to the reverse lights. This wire right here, it came out of J2. This red wire with a black stripe right here, that 3rd wire in right there, that goes to the reverse lights itself. Don't think I have enough wire to get there comfortably, so I'll add a little bit of length to this wire and connect it to there, and then my reverse lights should work. As for the air conditioning compressor, I only have 1 wire running to the body harness, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get this AC to work, but I'm going to do my best. There's 2 wires that are still not connected. I'm just going to wind them up for now and connect it to the compressor. But I think I'm going to have to go to some kind of standalone management for the AC, or figure out how they do AC in classic cars and kind of change the system, since I don't have the stock ECU anymore. So this will be a bridge that we can cross later when the car is running, because it's not a priority. Alright, I took the green wire coming from my Spitronics ECU. This is the tach output signal, and I connected it to this black wire that I got from the E4 plug. This black wire right here. That is supposed to be going to the tach. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to work or if I'm going to need some kind of signal converter, because the tach is for a 6-cylinder and this is an 8-cylinder. Not sure if I'll be able to adjust that in the Spitronics ECU, but they do make converter thingies for this purpose. But I'm going to try to see if I can use just the Spitronics and this cable for now. I labeled it RPM in case I have to cut into it and splice in that converter. Alright, fuel pump wiring is getting a bit ridiculous. You could just simply wire your own circuit and it wouldn't be that hard, but I'm trying to figure out how to utilize the factory components, or at least the factory wiring, and here's what I have found out. This right here is the fuel pump resistor. So I don't know if it's when you unlock the car or when you open up the door, but power flows through this resistor to give the pump a little bit of fuel. And here's the diagram here. There's the resistor. So I've been trying to find out where I have power and where I don't have power for this fuel pump relay. Here is the factory relay. It goes right here. And I was not getting signal power or main power to this relay. And I found out it's because I was not getting power to my EFI relay or my opening relay. So I made a jumper over there. So I made a jumper going from that pin on the fuel pump relay to that pin on the opening relay, and that is sending me main power over there to my fuel pump relay. But with the ignition turned off, when I put this relay in, the fuel pump will get power. That's because this is a normally closed relay, so I'm going to do away with this relay. Now, the Spitronics ECU comes with this orange wire from the ECU that is supposed to signal the fuel pump relay to turn on. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out and remove this whole section for the fuel pump relay and this little holder. I'm going to use this for my signal and utilize the ground and main power and the wire that goes to the fuel pump in here, but I'm going to put my own normally open relay in here so that my ECU can trigger it. So I'm just going to cut around that plastic, and then I'll have this relay hopefully live inside there. Okay, we got it cut out. Bear with me here. We have my aftermarket relay in there. And I have my anal probe here, and I'll show you what's going on. We have the battery connected, the key turned on, all that good stuff. Let me show you what we have going on here. So, this prong right here is going to the fuel pump. The blue wires with a red stripe. This is our main power that's going to feed the fuel pump, okay? So then we have to connect our trigger or ground to that one, and then this one. So I have my ground on the power probe hooked up to that pin. I'll show you what happens when I apply power. You can't hear it, but when I apply power, it's triggering the relay and telling the fuel pump to turn on. Now, you also have to remove this fuel pump resistor. If you leave this plugged in the way I jumped that and have this hooked up, it'll just constantly give it power. So we're deleting this fuel pump resistor. This is kind of like the 12-volt mod that the Mark III Super guys do. So we are just getting rid of this. So now what we need to do, one of those pins that has nothing, we need to take our fuel pump trigger wire from our Spitronics ECU and hook it to one, and then the other one simply gets grounded. And I ran my own ground wire, which is right here, and then the trigger is going to the Spitronics ECU. After I did that, I did install another relay. This is basically a relay to control the Spitronics ECU. I had a couple 12-volt switch sources here, but none of them had like a lot of power. So what I did, I ran my own relay, ran a big wire, ran this larger wire all the way to the battery to feed power to the relay, and this is a fused relay, has an integrated fuse right there, which is pretty cool. And I have a 12-volt trigger coming from this engine harness to basically trigger the relay, and then I have power coming out, which is going to the Spitronics ECU to turn it on, and I have a ground right here. So I didn't trust this little wire to power the Spitronics and everything, so I installed this relay. And now we're going to move on to the fans. There's 3 relays here. This is a bit of a complicated system. I'm going to try to make it as simple as I can. There's 3 freaking relays for 2 fans. So at this point, I'm almost giving up on air conditioning, but I'm not trying to eliminate anything. But here's the diagram for the fans. There's 3 relays. 2 of them get power from these fuses over here. And the way these relays are grounded are either through the temperature switch, the AC switch, or through this thingamabob here. So what I'm going to do to try to just use both fans at all times with the Spitronics is take the ground wire here, here, and here, and run them to my Spitronics ECU. I have a wire coming out of the ECU harness that is a switched ground. So the Spitronics ECU will ground these relays. And right here is a junction. There's 3 blue wires with a white stripe. At this connector right here, the J3 connector, that one, and that one. Those 3 wires need to be bundled together, and then that trigger ground should allow both fans to turn on. So that's what I'm going to do. I believe this junction here, those 3 power wires went to the ECU because it was a plug, and I believe the ECU controlled what happened with the fans. But when I bundle these 3 together, that will pretty much have the fans and everything ready with power, and they will get triggered by the Spitronics ECU. At least that's the plan. These wires right here at the J3 connector, these 4 wires that are blue with a black stripe, right here. These 4 wires, which are on the same connector as the blue wires with a white stripe, that went to the ECU. I need to cut all 4 of these out and crimp them together. Because on the diagram they went to the ECU, I need to tie them all together, and then I'm going to take this wire along with these 2 and ground it to the Spitronics. And this wire right here is this wire for the temperature switch that went to the radiator. So I'm going to cut this wire off here and extend that circuit to come over here and ground to the Spitronics ECU. Alright, change of plans one more time. We are doing away with messing with this. We only need to ground 2 of the wires. You could ground all 3 if you want, but we're going to do away with this one just because that connector is all the way over here, and it doesn't make sense to extend that circuit all the way over here. This circuit, the AC switch, was right here. The connector is down there, so the wiring is already on this side. And for here, we're not sure what this diode is, but this blue wire with a red stripe is right underneath the relay box here. Goes to fan relay 3. So we're gonna cut this wire, do a small extension to get it down here, and then cut the blue and black wire that's going to this AC switch. Put those 2 wires together, and then that will go to the wire to the Spitronics. And then we'll bundle all of these here, which are those wires right there. And so when you ground this, it's taking the ground from here. So you only need one of these. You don't need both. You can do whichever one you want, but you will also need to ground this one. Kind of hard to see, but the 4 blue wires with a white stripe that were going to the J3 connector, we bundled them together. Then the wire that went from that connector to the fan,
to the AC pressure switch?
To the AC pressure switch, we took to this connector here, and we also tied in the ground from relay number 3. That's this yellow wire that we tapped in. So when we ground this, which the Spitronics ECU is supposed to do, that's what this wire is, the fans will turn on. And we can demonstrate that using my power probe. So right now, I have 12 volt power coming out of that plug, and when I apply ground, the fans turn on. And both fans are running. So that's how you get your fans to work, by doing, the minimal amount of wiring. We kept the stock relays. Just had to do some cutting and splicing here. Hopefully you can follow along with what I did. All right, now it's not cleaned up by any means, but my wiring right now is complete for the ECU. So electronically, we should be able to get this thing to crank, but all the wiring is complete. And once the engine runs, I'm gonna put the factory ECU box here and try to shove all this crap in there and make it look better. But the wiring is complete for now. Okay, let's take a break from wiring. Well, we should be done for the most part. But on to other things. See this throttle cable? It's not nearly long enough, but I bought something that might be long enough. This is a throttle cable for a Lexus LX470, so it's a Lexus with a basically a UZ motor, I believe. Just by looking at pictures of the engine bay, it looked like it'd be pretty close, so I'm going to see if this will work. And like I said before, I made this completely drive-by cable. I'm not doing drive-by wire, so I figured this is going to be simpler. I'm not going to be able to show you how to do it, but should just be 2 bolts on the firewall and then disconnecting it from the pedal. Hopefully this is long enough. So I'll get it installed and we'll check out the length. Good old Toyota parts bin. This is the IS300 cable, and this is the Lexus LX470 cable. Literally the same thing, except for different length. So should work, as long as it's long enough, which it should be. Just gotta swap this over to the pedal, put this back in the car, and this was a pain in the ass getting these bolts out up under the dash. I don't know if I'll be able to get this one back in. All right, I got it installed, and I realized that my throttle pedal was too close to the floor, and that's because the little pedal stopper here is different from the IS300 to the LX470. So this is the bracket off the LX470, and you can see this section here is longer than on the IS300, and that affects your throttle or pedal position. So you just have to swap these metal plates over, and you should be good to go. I'll put this back up, and this thing should work. That throttle cable worked perfectly. That is with the pedal all the way to the floor, and it routes perfectly. I am so happy about that. So that is for the Lexus LX470. But yeah, that throttle cable worked perfect. Sweet. And in case you missed it, I didn't show it on camera, but I put something in here, I think from like Excessive Engineering or something, to convert this throttle body to drive-by cable. If you don't install that piece, then you won't be able to just use a throttle cable, because it'll only open like 20% with a cable. So you need that conversion in order to make this drive-by cable. All right, got the vacuum lines sorted out for the most part. So this 1UZ that came out of a GS400 did not have a barb on this intake manifold, say in the back, dedicated for the brake master cylinder, because it was electric power brakes, not vacuum assisted. So I ran this hose all the way up here. I wish I didn't have to run a big hose, that big of a hose that far, but that's what we're dealing with here. This other barb, this was supposed to go to here. So I ran this barb, which is slightly smaller, to the PCV valve. And then this one is capped off. I'm not sure what that was for, but it was capped off from the factory. And this barb I have feeding the map sensor for the Spitronics. And the only thing left is that, which that's not a vacuum line, that's just a breather. But then this will run to an intake when I put an intake here. But I think that's it for the vacuum lines. Sweet. Right here is the grounding strap that went to the engine block on the 2JZ. It was hanging further up there, but to avoid the exhaust, or to try to, I routed it back here and have it going to the bell housing. I'm probably going to put some protective heat shielding on here just to protect it from the exhaust, but this is certainly better than up there where it was touching. And also, right here was a drain that came over and down and was touching the header. I just cut it, so it was no longer touching the header. So we're all good for right now on the passenger side. Okay, I have my oil filter temporarily installed with the relocation kit. I'm not sure where I'm going to mount it, so I just left the hoses really long. But here's a very important note. There's 2 barbs on this relocation plate. It's kind of hard to see, but this barb is the one closest to the front of the engine. This one is towards the rear. So this one that's closer towards the front is the oil pump out. So if you're doing a relocation, the one towards the front, this is the out that would go to your oil filter. And then the one in the back is from the oil filter to the engine to supply it with oil. Very important. All right, so that was a lot. The wiring was very time consuming. I wouldn't say it was difficult. What was difficult was just figuring out the logistics of the wiring. And, you know, modifying the trans tunnel, that's not a big deal. I was told that you can flip these engine mounts and that will move the engine forward or back. I didn't try that, but I didn't want to move the engine any further back because we're already super close to the cross member, which we had to massage a lot, and we're already hitting the steering rack, which that would just cause more problems moving the engine further back if it was even possible. So modifying that trans tunnel a little bit, not that big of a deal. I'll take that. Wiring still looks like a bit of a mess here. My plan is, once I start moving forward, I'm going to try to get this rat's nest in the factory ECU box to make it look a little bit better. And I think at this point, I'm giving up on air conditioning. That's a long-term goal, not a short-term goal. I'll try to get the line connected and, you know, I'll try to get the system sealed. But as for the wiring, it's going to be pretty difficult and just not a priority, so I'm not going to focus my time and energy on that just yet. But now this engine is ready to fire. It's filled with oil, and it should be ready to turn on. Not run very long. There's no coolant hooked up or anything, but this engine should be ready to fire, and I think we'll get into that in the next video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm sure you learned something about 1UZ swapping an IS300. And we'll see you next time, hopefully firing this thing up. Thanks.